Hello everyone, my name is Joshua Sanders and I'm going to talk to you guys about a relevant issue dealing with sexism called toxic masculinity, in which affects each and every one of us, whether it be directly in our environments or systematic on a more macro level. I wanted to start out by showing you guys this video because I believe it really captures toxic masculinity from a relatable perspective for all of us and provides good insight to some of the issues I will be discussing.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual
Toxic
harassment.
masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it? We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
But something finally changed.
Allegations regarding sexual assault and sexual harassment.
But she says
And there will be no going back. Because we believe in the best in men.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
Smile, sweetie. Come on.
To say the right thing. To act the right way.
Bro, not cool. Not cool.
Some already are. In ways big
Yo, men.
and small.
I am strong.
But some is not enough.
It's not how we treat each other, okay? Okay.
Because the boys watching today will be the men of tomorrow.
As you guys can see, this video provides strong advocacy in terms of toxic masculinity. Media is a very strong influence regarding gender roles and norms. So what exactly is toxic masculinity? Though there is no solidified definition for toxic masculinity, as this term can vary upon many different factors such as culture, toxic masculinity, according to Brian Skoulos, generally refers to a loosely interrelated collection of norms, beliefs, and behaviors associated with masculinity. So, in simple terms, toxic masculinity refers to a set of traits and behaviors associated with masculinity having a negative impact on men in society as a whole. So then, what traits and behaviors are associated with toxic masculinity? According to Skoulos, these traits and behaviors include hypercompetitiveness, individualistic self-sufficiency, tendency towards or glorification of violence, chauvinism, which is a paternalism towards women, sexism being male superiority, misogyny or the hatred of women, rigid conceptions of sexual and gender identity and roles, heteronormativity or the belief in the naturalness and superiority of heterosexuality and cisgenderness, entitlement to attention from women or even the sexual attention, objectification of women or even the sexual objectification of women, and the infantilization of women or treating women as immature or not capable. So, according to Brian Skoulos, everyone is afraid of toxic masculinity, whether they realize it or not. This does not necessarily mean that everyone is emotionally scared of toxic masculinity, but more so that everyone sees toxic masculinity as a threat to themselves and or society as a whole. So then, why is toxic masculinity important to social work? According to the preamble in the NSAW Code of Ethics, the primary mission of the social work profession is to enhance human well-being and help meet the basic human needs of all people, with particular attention to the needs and empowerment of people who are vulnerable, oppressed, and living in poverty. In relation to toxic masculinity and its importance to social work, there becomes particular attention to the oppression and the vulnerability of marginalized populations such as women in the LGBTQ community as well as people of color. So then, how does toxic masculinity affect women? As mentioned previously, the socialization and sense of a male breadwinner in relation to family structure or the traditional patriarchal family paternalism towards women, systematic sexism, the hatred of women, male entitlement towards women, whether that be attention or objectification of women sexually or just in general, and the condescending societal attitudes towards women, all which are caused by toxic masculinity and all shown to cause vulnerability and oppression in women. Women are facing forms of sexism due to toxic masculinity not only through the individual interactions in their environments, but through the systematic sexism on the micro level of society. This becomes relevant to toxic masculinity as the traditional masculine traits and roles within society have been thought of to have conceived these systematic oppressions towards women with regards to sexism. Toxic masculinity causes women to accept lower pay wages, being that women are not offered the same positions as men, and if they are, it is generally with lower pay. Women also spend more money towards beautification and acceptance of society and male expectations. Systematic discrimination towards women, also known as sexism, and ultimately toxic masculinity causes women to experience a weaker quality of life. These ideals around the sexism and limitations towards women in our society have been proven to be upheld by the ideals of toxic masculinity ingrained into our society, which tend to be normalized and socialized through the media and even politics. So then, how exactly does toxic masculinity affect the LGBTQ community? As mentioned, toxic masculinity causes heteronormativity in our society, in which is a belief in the naturalness and superiority of heterosexuality and cisgenderness. Toomey, McGuire, and Russell state in their article on heteronormativity that heteronormativity is a societal hierarchical system that privileges and sanctions individuals based on their presumed binaries of gender and sexuality. As a system, it defines and enforces beliefs and practices about what is normal in everyday contemporary adolescence. Although most research works with these individuals at the micro level, Toomey, McGuire, and Russell make it clear that heteronormativity is a social and contextual concept, placing more concern for the meso and macro levels of practice. So then, how does heteronormativity have importance to social work, and how does it affect the LGBTQ community? Well, similar to sexism towards women, heteronormativity causes limitations and barriers on individuals who identify as LGBTQ in their systems and environments. Up until recently, in a ruling by the Supreme Court, people who identified as not being straight could be fired for their sexual orientation. In a recent policy change in Texas, known as the SB 6, in which social workers were allowed to turn away clients who identified as LGBTQ. As shown, heteronormativity, which is a result of toxic masculinity, causes many barriers and limitations for the LGBTQ community in terms of their social interactions with individuals and groups, as well as limited resources in terms of livelihood and opportunity. When considering the safety of LGBTQ individuals in environments such as a school setting, there becomes an apparent concern not only for the mental or psychological safety of these individuals, but also a concern for the physical safety of these individuals as well. Due to heteronormativity, middle and high school students are at high risk of victimization when they do not conform to norms regarding gender. These students are at risk of being bullied, excluded, and victimized in terms of their gender expression. I really like these animations as the scales represent the inequality due to toxic masculinity and the woman represents the feminine beauty ideals. So now the question arises, how are social workers combating toxic masculinity? So according to Rolando Tompkins Jones, master social worker and limited license master social worker, social workers can help to combat toxic masculinity on all levels of practice depending on their area of field. On the micro and meso levels, social workers can work with individuals or groups of men to explore healthier concepts of masculinity through concepts such as a cycle of socialization, which works to really investigate and challenge the roots of where toxic behaviors and expectations of masculinity come from, and they work with them to challenge and interrupt these roles and expectations that contribute to the toxic aspects of masculinity. So the criminal justice system also can reinforce toxic masculinity, from police officers to prosecutors and even judges. Social workers can address toxic masculinity through the macro level by working with communities to leverage power and resources in order to surface how toxic masculinity is playing a role in systems such as a criminal justice system, and also to sanction as well as advocate for replacement of the figures who are using their power in harmful ways. Social workers can also work with others to advocate against gender-specific items and toys that reinforce toxic masculinity and other forms of patriarchy through gender stereotypes. So now I have come up with a couple things that each and every one of us can do in order to combat toxic masculinity. This is our call to action. It is the responsibility of all of us to speak up and speak out against toxic masculinity. There are simple things that we can all do in our everyday life to combat the social conditioning of toxic masculinity. When you hear a friend make a derogatory or sexist remark against a woman, challenge him. When you feel like crying, cry, even if you're a guy and it does not seem cool by your friends. If someone makes a joke about gay people or uses a gay slang word, call them out on it. Don't support entertainment like movies that glorify toxic masculinity. This is important in changing future generations and the social climate of our society. When we all make a conscious effort to combat these negative social encounters, things will start to change. Everything starts with you. I just want to say that I'm very thankful for this opportunity, as I myself have been affected by toxic masculinity in various ways in my own life. As a social worker, this has really opened my eyes to what toxic masculinity is, how it can affect people, and that it really is relevant in all of our systems. As shown with the information in this presentation, toxic masculinity does not stop with sexism. Toxic masculinity causes heterosexism, discrimination, and even racism. Toxic masculinity affects each and every one of us, and it is my hope that you guys will also see the importance in addressing toxic masculinity. I hope that as a whole, we can slowly defeat this toxic side of masculinity. Thank you.